Are you eating healthy, watching your cholesterol, maybe taking a handful of supplements each morning, and yet still feeling like something's missing? Like, despite doing all the right things, you're not quite cracking the code to truly vibrant, long lasting health? Here's a surprising truth: the foods that consistently show up in the diets of people who actually live to 100 aren't exotic superfoods or expensive supplements. They're humble, everyday foods that most people overlook entirely. And today, I'm going to share exactly what they are, why they work, and how to make them part of your daily life without overhauling everything you already do. Here's what's really going on inside your body when it comes to longevity. As we age, the biggest threat isn't a single disease or a failing organ. It's something much more fundamental. It's chronic, low grade inflammation combined with oxidative stress, and it's cellular damage that accumulates slowly over decades. Most people focus on symptoms: the joint pain, the brain fog, the energy crashes. But those are downstream effects. The real root cause is what's happening at the cellular level, in your gut, in your mitochondria, and in the delicate balance of your microbiome. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your body like a house that's been standing for 60 or 70 years. What determines whether that house is still beautiful and functional versus crumbling and falling apart isn't usually one big catastrophic event. It's whether there's been a consistent daily maintenance crew showing up to fix the small cracks, repaint when needed, reinforce the foundation, and keep the systems running. The foods we're going to talk about today are your body's maintenance crew. They're not dramatic or flashy, but they show up every single day and do the quiet work that keeps everything intact. Research from the landmark Danish twin study established that only about 20% of how long the average person lives is dictated by our genes. That means 80% is determined by our lifestyle, and a significant portion of that comes down to what we put on our plates. The people who reach 100 don't do it by accident. They do it through consistent, simple daily habits, and food is at the center of those habits. Today, we're going to cover 4 specific food groups that research has consistently linked to exceptional longevity. These aren't based on fads or trends. They're based on decades of population studies, clinical research, and observations from the blue zones, those 5 regions around the world where people live measurably longer than anywhere else on Earth. In the next section, we'll talk about the single most important dietary predictor of survival that researchers have identified, and I promise it's not what you'd expect. Now let's talk about legumes, and this might surprise you. When researchers analyzed dietary patterns across multiple studies and different ethnic groups, they found that beans, lentils, chickpeas, and other legumes emerged as the single most important dietary predictor of survival in older adults. Not fish, not olive oil, not even vegetables. Beans. One of the most damaging myths about beans is that they're just a cheap filler food, something you eat when you can't afford meat. This couldn't be further from the truth. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat legumes. Beans contain a unique combination of protein, complex carbohydrates, and fiber that creates a slow, sustained release of energy without spiking your blood sugar. But more importantly, they feed your gut microbiome in ways that almost no other food can match. The fiber in beans is prebiotic, meaning it serves as food for the beneficial bacteria in your intestines. When these bacteria ferment this fiber, they produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which have powerful anti-inflammatory effects throughout your entire body. This isn't just about digestion. What happens in your gut affects your brain, your immune system, your heart, and even your mood. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your gut bacteria like a workforce in a factory. They can't work if they don't have raw materials to process. Most of what we eat in the modern diet, the refined carbohydrates, the processed foods, essentially passes through without giving those workers anything meaningful to do. Beans are like delivering a truckload of premium raw materials to that factory. Suddenly, your workforce has something to work with, and the production of beneficial compounds skyrockets. What the research shows is remarkable. A meta-analysis found that for every 20 grams of legumes consumed per day, which is just about 2 tablespoons, there was an associated 7 to 8% lower risk of death from all causes. Another study following seniors over 7 years found that legume intake was the most consistent dietary predictor of longevity across all ethnic groups studied, including Japanese, Swedes, Greeks, and Australians. The centenarians in blue zones don't eat 2 tablespoons of beans. They eat a full cup daily, compounding these benefits significantly. Here's a simple protocol for seniors. Start by adding just half a cup of beans to your daily diet. This could be black beans in a salad, chickpeas in a stew, lentils in soup, or white beans mashed into a spread. You don't need to eat beans at every meal. One serving per day is enough to start seeing benefits. If you experience digestive discomfort, start smaller and increase gradually. Your gut bacteria will adapt over 2 to 3 weeks. Canned beans are perfectly fine. Just rinse them to reduce sodium. If this approach to longevity through simple foods is resonating with you, consider subscribing. I share evidence-based health information every day to help you age with vitality and strength. Now let's move on to the next food that shows up consistently in the diets of the world's longest-lived people. Now let's talk about leafy greens, and here's where we start to see a pattern. The centenarians in every blue zone, from Sardinia to Okinawa to Ikaria, consume dark leafy greens almost daily. And the research on cognitive health makes this particularly compelling for anyone concerned about keeping their mind sharp as they age. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat leafy greens regularly. These vegetables are extraordinarily dense in specific nutrients that your brain needs to maintain its structure and function. Lutein, folate, beta-carotene, and vitamin K1, also called phylloquinone, all concentrate in leafy greens at levels you simply cannot get from other foods. These compounds cross the blood-brain barrier and provide direct neuroprotective benefits. Research published by the National Institute on Aging found something remarkable. Adults who consumed at least one serving of leafy greens per day experienced significantly slower age-related cognitive decline compared to those who rarely ate them. The difference was equivalent to being 11 years younger in terms of brain function. Let me say that again. One daily serving of spinach, kale, or collard greens was associated with a brain that functioned as if it were 11 years younger. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Your brain is like a sophisticated electrical system with billions of connections. Over time, the insulation on those wires, the myelin sheaths, can deteriorate. The nutrients in leafy greens act like fresh insulation being applied continuously, protecting those connections from degradation and keeping the signals firing clearly. Without these nutrients, the system gets noisier and less efficient. What the research shows is that the specific combination of compounds in greens works synergistically. Folate helps reduce homocysteine, an amino acid linked to brain shrinkage when elevated. Vitamin K1 is essential for sphingolipid metabolism, which is critical for brain cell membranes. Lutein accumulates in brain tissue and acts as an antioxidant right where you need it most. No single supplement provides all of these benefits in the same bioavailable form that whole leafy greens do. Here's a practical protocol for seniors. Aim for 1 packed cup of raw leafy greens or half a cup of cooked greens daily. Spinach is the mildest and most versatile. Kale holds up well in soups and stews. Swiss chard and collard greens offer variety. If you struggle with raw greens, try adding a handful of spinach to a morning smoothie. You won't taste it, but you'll get all the benefits. Cooking greens with a little olive oil actually helps you absorb more of the fat-soluble nutrients like beta-carotene and vitamin K. Now, let's talk about something that might seem counterintuitive: nuts, and specifically eating them every single day. Many seniors were taught that nuts are fattening and should be avoided or strictly limited. This is one of the most persistent and harmful myths in nutrition, and the research tells a completely different story. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat nuts. Despite being calorie-dense, nuts don't behave in your body the way those calories would suggest. The fat in nuts is packaged within a cellular structure that your body doesn't fully break down. Research using metabolic studies has shown that you absorb significantly fewer calories from nuts than what's listed on the label, sometimes up to 30% fewer. Meanwhile, you get the full benefit of the nutrients. But the benefits go far beyond calories. Nuts contain a unique profile of unsaturated fats, plant sterols, fiber, and minerals like magnesium and selenium that work together to protect your cardiovascular system, reduce inflammation, and support healthy aging at the cellular level. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of nuts like a time-release capsule for nutrition. When you eat nuts, you're not getting a rapid dump of nutrients that your body has to scramble to process. Instead, the nutrients are released slowly as your digestive system gradually breaks down the cellular walls. This means sustained energy, stable blood sugar, and a gentle, continuous supply of protective compounds reaching your cells over hours rather than minutes. What the research shows is genuinely striking. A massive Harvard study following over 100,000 people for 30 years found that those who ate a daily handful of nuts were 20% less likely to die from any cause during the study period. Another meta-analysis calculated that consuming 28 grams of nuts per day, roughly a small handful, was associated with a 22% reduction in all-cause mortality, a 21% reduction in cardiovascular disease, and an 11% reduction in cancer deaths. These are not small effects. They rival some pharmaceutical interventions. Here's a practical protocol for seniors. Eat one small handful of nuts daily, about 28 grams or 1 ounce. This is roughly what fits in your palm. Variety is beneficial. Walnuts are particularly high in omega-3s. Almonds are excellent for vitamin E. Brazil nuts provide selenium, though limit these to 2 or 3 per day due to selenium content. Keep nuts in a visible spot in your kitchen. Research shows people eat more of what they see. Unsalted and raw is ideal, but lightly roasted is fine too. If this information is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post videos every day about the science of healthy aging to help you add not just years to your life, but life to your years. In the next section, we'll talk about a food that's been used for thousands of years and is now showing remarkable effects in modern longevity research. Now let's talk about fermented foods. And this is where the emerging science of the microbiome meets traditional wisdom. Cultures around the world that enjoy exceptional longevity have independently developed traditions of fermenting foods, from the miso and natto in Okinawa, to the sauerkraut in parts of Europe, to the yogurt in the Mediterranean. This is not a coincidence. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you eat fermented foods. The fermentation process transforms ordinary foods into something far more powerful. Beneficial bacteria break down compounds in the food, creating new bioactive molecules that weren't there before. When you eat these foods, you're not just getting nutrients, you're getting living microorganisms that take up residence in your gut and compounds that have already been partially digested and made more bioavailable. A landmark study from Stanford University found that people who ate a diet high in fermented foods for just 10 weeks showed increased gut microbiome diversity and decreased markers of inflammation. This wasn't a small effect. Inflammatory markers like interleukin-6, which is associated with chronic conditions like type 2 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and chronic stress, decreased significantly. The researchers concluded that fermented foods may be especially powerful for combating the kind of low-grade chronic inflammation that drives so many age-related diseases. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Your gut microbiome is like a garden. Over time, especially with modern diets, antibiotics, and environmental factors, that garden can become overrun with weeds and lose its diversity. Fermented foods are like bringing in a whole new set of beneficial seeds and plants while also improving the soil itself. You're not just adding good bacteria, you're creating conditions where good bacteria can thrive and outcompete the harmful ones. What the research shows is that the benefits extend well beyond digestion. A recent comprehensive review published in late 2025 found that fermented foods exhibit anti-aging potential through multiple mechanisms, including regulation of oxidative stress and control of chronic inflammation, two of the primary drivers of aging at the cellular level. The study noted that people who regularly consumed fermented foods showed differences in their gut bacterial composition that were associated with healthier aging trajectories. Here's a practical protocol for seniors. Aim to include at least 1 serving of fermented food daily. Options include plain yogurt with live active cultures, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, tempeh, or traditionally fermented pickles. The key word is live. Many commercial products are pasteurized after fermentation, which kills the beneficial bacteria. Look for products in the refrigerated section that say contains live cultures or unpasteurized. Start small if you're new to fermented foods. Even a few tablespoons daily can make a difference, and your gut will adapt over time. Now let's talk about olive oil, and this brings us to one of the most well-researched foods in the entire longevity literature. The Mediterranean region, particularly areas like Icaria, Greece, has some of the highest concentrations of centenarians in the world, and olive oil is central to their daily diet. Here's what's really going on inside your body when you consume olive oil, particularly extra virgin olive oil. Unlike most cooking oils, extra virgin olive oil is essentially fresh pressed fruit juice that retains all of its beneficial compounds. It contains over 30 different polyphenols, which are plant compounds with powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. The most studied of these is oleocanthal, which has been shown to have effects similar to ibuprofen in reducing inflammation, but without the side effects. One of the most surprising things about olive oil is how it affects your cardiovascular system. It doesn't just reduce bad cholesterol, it actually changes the function of your HDL cholesterol, making it more effective at its job of clearing arterial plaque. Research has also shown that olive oil polyphenols protect your LDL cholesterol from oxidation, and it's oxidized LDL that is actually dangerous to your arteries. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your blood vessels like pipes in an old house. Over time, sediment and corrosion can build up inside those pipes, restricting flow and causing problems. Olive oil is like a gentle, continuous cleaning agent that keeps those pipes clear, prevents new buildup, and even repairs minor damage before it becomes serious. The people who use this cleaning agent daily for decades end up with remarkably clear pipes. What the research shows is consistent and compelling. A Harvard study found that consuming more than half a tablespoon of olive oil per day was associated with a 19% lower risk of cardiovascular disease mortality, 17% lower risk of cancer mortality, 29% lower risk of neurodegenerative disease mortality, and 18% lower risk of respiratory disease mortality. A separate study published in JAMA found that higher olive oil consumption was associated with lower risk of dementia-related mortality, particularly in women. Here's a practical protocol for seniors. Use at least 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil daily. Drizzle it on salads, cooked vegetables, bread, or finished dishes. Quality matters here. Look for olive oil that's been cold pressed and comes in a dark bottle to protect it from light degradation. The bottle should have a harvest date, not just an expiration date. Good olive oil should have a slightly peppery, almost spicy finish when you taste it straight. That pepper sensation comes from oleocanthal, the anti-inflammatory compound. If your olive oil tastes bland or greasy, it may be old or low quality. And here's the empowering part. You don't need to choose between these foods. The centenarians in blue zones aren't eating just one of these foods. They're eating all of them every single day as part of a simple, consistent pattern. A bowl of beans with greens dressed with olive oil, followed by some yogurt and a handful of nuts. That meal alone contains everything we've discussed today. Let's bring everything together. The foods that actually help people live to 100 aren't expensive, rare, or complicated. They're beans, leafy greens, nuts, fermented foods, and olive oil. What makes them powerful isn't any single miraculous property, it's that they address the root causes of aging, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, gut dysbiosis, and cellular damage. They do this through mechanisms that work together, amplifying each other's effects when eaten consistently over time. The research is remarkably consistent across populations and study designs. Beans reduce all-cause mortality by 7 to 8% for every 20 grams consumed daily. Leafy greens slow cognitive aging by the equivalent of 11 years. A daily handful of nuts reduces mortality risk by 20%. Fermented foods decrease inflammatory markers and increase beneficial gut bacteria diversity. Olive oil reduces mortality from cardiovascular disease, cancer, and dementia. Here's your 14-day challenge. For the next 2 weeks, commit to eating all 5 of these foods every single day. 1 cup of beans, 1 serving of leafy greens, 1 handful of nuts, 1 serving of fermented food, and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Track how you feel. Notice your energy levels, your digestion, your mental clarity. You're not trying to transform everything at once. You're just giving your body's maintenance crew the supplies they need to do their job. Longevity isn't about restriction, it's about abundance, the abundance of real, whole foods that your body recognizes and knows exactly how to use. It's not about perfect meals or complicated regimens. It's about simple, consistent daily habits that add up over decades. When you eat a bowl of beans, you're not eating a cheap food. You're eating the cornerstone of the centenarian diet. When you drizzle olive oil on your salad, you're not adding fat to your meal. You're delivering 30 different anti-inflammatory compounds to every cell in your body. When you eat a handful of walnuts, you're not indulging in a snack. You're investing in 20 more years of cognitive function. Your body already knows how to heal, how to repair, how to maintain itself. It's been doing it your entire life. You just have to give it the raw materials it needs and then stay consistent. That's the real secret the world's longest lived people understand. Not dramatic interventions, not expensive treatments, just simple foods, eaten daily for a lifetime. I'll see you in the next video.